It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy. We're the hometown commander, and we are back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I, or in this case, Andrew, brews our version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on our quest to outbrew your favorite Magic channel. Andrew tried his best to record this episode, but unfortunately his setup was not working. So I thought I would jump in and make sure this deck got out, because I have to say, I really like the list he brewed in front of us. If you haven't seen any episodes of Millsy Brews this week, the show is changing just slightly. We're adding a little bit of gold fishing at the end, as well as by the time this video goes up, I'm going to have chapters for all of our videos going forward, so that way you can see the things you want to see in the videos that you are interested in. But today, Andrew took a stab at probably a commander I think fits his playstyle a lot better than mine. That's Nahiri Forged in Fury, a Boros equipment deck that is pretty darn good. 4 red white for a 5/4 core artificer, affinity for equipment, so it costs 1 less for each equipment we control. Whenever an equipped creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library. You could play that card this turn. You may cast equipment spells this way without paying their mana cost. If we flip an equipment, get to cast it for free. Andrew has always had such an affinity for this, and that is a pun, of course, for equipment decks. Wyleth, the card that he has in this deck, was one of the first precons he ever bought, and he's always really enjoyed this style, and I feel like he's always done a better job with this deck than I have. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just because I prefer different types of decks, or I enjoyed more different things, but this is a style he's always loved. And I think he's built a really good equipment deck, especially for the price. So let's get into it. Let's start with the lands. Pretty basic red-white mana base. You got the Rogue's Passage, which is going to help a ton for those scenarios where you have something really souped up and you want to get in for a good hit. I like the Stronghold for Vigilance and Haste. You got Sunhome for the double strike. I like these lands that kind of give you these combat abilities. And the X-Card Armory, I like this inclusion here, one of the uncommon lands from Kaldheim, letting you go get that ore equipment and put it into your hand. Go get whatever you need for 4 mana. Yes, it's 4 mana, but you'd be very surprised later in the game you may have that 4 mana open and you're willing to use it to go get something you need and get it in to your hand, just two enchantments, and it's honestly all you need. One is the most played enchantment in any equipment deck, and that's Sigarda's Aid, because it's truly a staple for most equipment lists. You can cast or equipment spells as though they had flash, and whenever an equipment enters the battlefield, you can attach it to a creature you control. So this plus Nahiri basically means you're going to cast whatever you get off the top, and you're going to attach it for free. This is killer. I mean, this Sigarda's Aid is exactly what you want a deck like this to get rid of all those equip costs. And then we're playing Passionate Archaeologist again. We're playing equipments off the top, so this is going to deal some damage every time we play that equipment off the top. Now, the cool part with Nahiri is, if it's not an equipment, we can still play it. So it's not like if we flip it and if it's not an equipment, we just lose it. We still get to play it. So Passionate Archaeologist will still deal some damage, even if we don't flip an equipment. All right, so getting into the artifacts, 26 artifacts, and it makes a ton of sense because we're playing a ton of equipment. Now, the one thing that Andrew has done really well with, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we get up top, is using some of the reconfigure creatures as well, because they're technically equipment as well, but we'll get into that. Let's talk about all of our non-equipment artifacts, and then we'll go through all the equipment he chose. Arcane Signet, right, makes sense. Boros Signet again, makes sense. I'm going to mention Dowsing Dagger because it flips over into a land on the backside if you can hit with the creature that deals with it. This is great. This is a card that fits 2 roles. It's an equipment, and then it flips over into a land. Soaring, of course, your classic and always worth playing, and the Talisman. So not a ton of mana rocks, but I think we're going to make up for it with some of the other things we get to play. Of course, Sword of the Animist, getting us land every time we attack. Reaver Cleaver, making us those treasures. Forge of Frontier can get us a card off the 2 cards off the top and an extra land. Feast and Famine can untap our lands. These are the kind of equipment we want to see. The Boots for haste. Shadow Spear, probably one of my favorite equipment in the game, giving something trample and lifelink, and that's pretty beneficial, especially the bigger that creature gets. Nettle Cyst comes in, makes a token for you, or you could attach it to something else. +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment you control. That's going to get big. That creature's going to get big. Masterwork of Ingenuity can come in as a copy of any equipment on the battlefield. This is kind of killer. especially since most legendary, most artifacts aren't most of these equipment aren't legendary, right? So to come in and get another copy of Metal Cyst or a lot of other things is pretty darn great. I mean, you could have probably also played like Sculpting Steel as well and done the exact same thing. Cauldron Complete, same thing as Nettlecyst comes in with a token, or you can put another creature, +5/+5, and first strike, trample, indestructible, haste. Whenever this creature deals common damage to a creature, exile that creature. So basically, you're going to exile any blockers. Great piece of equipment, and if this comes in and you can equip it for free, even better. Other than that, it just comes in and gets you a 5/5 with those abilities. Cauldron Complete seems great. We see Hexblade Wallbreaker, one of our Mirrodin cards from Phyrexian LB1. It says whenever it attacks with its first combat phase this turn, untap each attacking creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So this will actually allow Nahiri to go off twice in one turn if we start with our turn with this, because it's every time an equipped creature attacks. And I actually just realized that's every time a equipped creature can attack, not one or more. So that's going to go off for everyone. So that could get pretty tough to deal with. Hexcold Hoverings, equipped creature has flying, pretty great. The Halberd, first strike and trample, again, great. Hammer and Dazan, +2/+1, indestructible, love it. And this can actually attach for free. Gold Vein Pick, getting that treasure. Godsend, whenever the equipped creature blocks or becomes blocked by one or more creatures, you may exile one of those creatures, and opponents can't cast card with the same name, exile Godsend. That doesn't make as much of a difference in Commander because it's not going to be that common, but the top one's pretty darn good. Exiling a blocker, Darksteel Plate for that indestructibility, Colossus Hammer for that massive +10/+10, Bladehold War Whip for double strike. Bitterthorn can get us a basic land every time that creature attacks, which is actually going to be pretty important because it and sort of the Animus plays such an important role in this deck in ramping us, because we're not going to get it right. We don't have any ramp spells. We have mana artifacts, but these are the kind of equipment I think that are going to do more work in getting us things. And then Batterskull, Vigilance, and Lifelink, and we can actually return it back to our hand if we need to. So I like it. I think it's a good piece of equipment suite. If there's any other equipment, I always like to give Andrew little notes when I go over his decks, just because it's fun, and him and I think so differently. I would love to see like Maul the Skyclaves to come in and give that creature flying and first strike. Might have been fun, because you get to do this on attack and not after blocks. So that's the only one I can think off the top of my head. Maul the Skyclaves, or like Embercleave. I'm surprised Embercleave's not in here, but again, picking equipment is very tough because there's so much good equipment. I mean, he's only playing 2 of the swords. He could have been playing more of them, right? You think about how many equipment are active in the game and how much you have access to. I mean, there's been so many choices here, but I think he did a great job. I like the Mirrodin picks because they're going to give you a body. Same thing with the living weapons. They're going to give you a body along with the equipment, not just the equipment, which is going to help getting more and more Nahiri triggers. So I do definitely like that. Man, spells, there aren't many of them because we really don't need any of them. And if you look at it, this is literally just protection and destruction, right? For destruction, Blasphemous Act and Vanquish the Hordes are board wipes. We have Disenchant for artifacts and enchantments, which is great because it's going to become important to get rid of those. Plowshares for some removal of creatures, and then Wear and Tear, one of my favorite Boros cards of all time. So great. 3 mana, get rid of an artifact and enchantment, or either or. I love it. Open the armory for a little bit of search. I mean, it feels right. It's an equipment deck staple. Go in and get the equipment you need. And then for protection, Chroma's Will is kind of a protection and also an offensive card, right? You can use this to just blow a game out if you have a commander, because everything you get becomes unblockable basically, and you're just going to run through. Boros Charm can give your other creatures indestructible or give a creature double strike to potentially take somebody out. Clever Concealment, one of my single favorite cards of this year. If you haven't played this card, if you haven't bought this card, buy it before it keeps going up, or it will probably go up over time. Can protect our whole board, and we're going to have enough white creatures that we're just going to be able to do this to protect our board. Flawless Maneuver for that protection, especially if we have our commander. Surge of Salvation is a card that Andrew absolutely loves. He's talked so much about it, giving all of your permanents hexproof and preventing damage from red and black sources to your creatures. This is actually kind of a cool, if you think about it, because you could play it in response to the Blasphemous Act and actually have a one-sided board wipe. And then Unbreakable Formation for some more destructible. As you can see, we're using the spells to our advantage. Protection, just a little bit of mainly protection so that we can take those attacks even when they look bad if we need to, or just protect from a board wipe, untap, and get the game moving. We'll go through all the creatures right now, and I have to say I really like the mix of creatures here. We have one of the most popular of course, equipment creatures of all time in other formats, in Modern, in Stoneforge Mystic. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you switch library for equipment, put it in your hand, and then shuffle, and we can put our equipments from our hand in the battlefield. But I like this creature suite, and we'll go through them one by one because I think all of them are just like the who's who of like popular equipment creatures. And I think what's really hilarious to me about like Boros equipment decks is if you think about it, any of these guys could be commanders, but they fit really great as kind of secondary commanders in this deck, because even if Nahiri gets wiped off the table, you still have all of these other relevant creatures. They're just going to turn the game in your side. Akiri, Fearless Forager. Whenever you attack a player with one or more equipped creatures, draw a card. And then white to unattached equipment from a creature you control. If you do, tap that creature and it gets indestructible. So you can kind of protect a creature either from a board wipe or from combat. Arden, beginning of combat, you can attach any numbers of equipment you control to target permanent or player. This basically means that if you really wanted to, whether it's getting Nahiri in for commander damage or getting another creature in for big damage, put all your equipment on one creature and just go swinging. Astor Bearer Blades from Dominaria United. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 7, you may reveal equipment and put it into your hand, put the rest in the bottom, and equipment you control have equip 1, vehicles you control have equip 1. So we're basically taking all of our equipment and bringing it down to equip 1, which makes so much equipment better. Had he chose, things like Argentum armor or things like that, that would have brought them down to just 1. So Astor is great because it's bringing all of your equipment. If you can't free cast them or you can't use Sigard's Aid, if you don't have things like that, it brings all of it down to equip 1. Bladecraft Aspirant, Menace, everything costs 1 less to equip, and activated abilities of equipment you control that target it cost 1 less to activate. So if you try to equip it to it costs 2 less, and that's great because it has Menace, so it's going to be tough to block. Brass Squire from Commander Legends, attached equipment you control, target creature you control. This is great because you can get around paying that crazy cost, no matter what it is. I like it. Again, you could start to see we're getting cheeky with some good creatures to attach to, but things to help us attach to things. Burner Battlehammer, one of my favorite of the Boros equipment commanders. Each creature you control gets +2/+R for each equipment attached to it. This plus trample can do a ton of damage on a board to your opponents. And you can pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate each turn. And that's great because then you can attach some good stuff for free. Chiskoria, Forged Tyrant. This is a card that Andrew has a lot of love for. I think it's a little risky in a deck like this, but hey, we all have to play the cards we want to play. Affinity for Artifacts. Flying Haste, when it attacks, exile the top 5. You may cast an artifact spell from among them this turn. If you do, it has affinity for artifacts. I don't know. My only problem with Chiskoria is if you flip 5 and you flip 5 good things, it feels bad. I get why it's in here. It's a massive dragon, and it's going to do a great job in this deck. Don't get me wrong. This is a great body to start putting on equipment to. I worry about what happens when you flip 5 great equipment and you just have to pick one. I don't know. Maybe that's a little reductionist of me, but that's how I feel about Chiskoria, and that's why I've kind of never touched it in my artifact decks. But hey, I know Andrew loves Chiskoria, and I will probably lose to this card at least once in this deck, so I'm fine with that. Danitha, Capish, and Paragon. Artifact ores and equipments you cast cost 1 less to cast. That's great because this is not just reducing the equip, this is reducing the cost on the way down, which is great. Danitha, Benalia's Hope. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may put an ore or equipment from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to Danitha, so we can kind of get some equipment back. And that's great because it's easy to say, oh, get it off the top, get it from your hand, but sometimes your equipment are going to go to the graveyard. Someone's going to destroy one. How are we getting it back? So that is important. Foundry Inspector, just flat 1 reduction to all artifacts. I'm so glad he included Halvar. Halvar is a card that I love for these equipment style builds because his front size is creatures that you control that are enchanted or equipped to have double strike. That's a problem. All we need to do is put 1 trample equipment on a creature, and now double strike is going to become a problem for a lot of people to block. In the beginning of each combat, you may attach an aura or enchantment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control, so you can just move 1 basically. Or if you don't want his front side, you get an equipment on the back side. That creature has +2/+1 vigilance, and whenever the equipped creature dies, you return to its owner's hand. And that's actually really good because then that means you can kind of protect your creature. Or for the sake of our commander, we can put it back into our hand and not have to pay commander tax. So I like Halvar a lot. It's a card that I was really happy to see in call time when it released, and I'm glad Andrew included it in the deck. Jorkadine, first Gold Warden, a card from Phyrexian RB1 that makes a ton of sense in this deck. When it attacks, it gets +X/+X until in a turn where X is the number of equipped creatures you control. Then if it's 4 or greater, you draw a card. Well, here we go. We got card draw, and it's going to get bigger, and it has trample. This is also a really great creature to soup up and get going, given any sort of evasion, because it's just going to hit hard. I love Jorkadine. And again, another great example of another great Boros commander. Call the Forge Master from call time. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, if it was equipped or enchanted, return to its owner's hands. That's great. Pull things back to our hands instead of them going to the graveyard. And creature tokens you control that are equipped, it gets +1/+1. So again, this is going to help with those Vermeerding creatures, those Vermeerding enchantments that are, artifacts that are making tokens when they come in. This is going to help with those living weapon and equipment. So you can see Cole, again, fits everything that we're trying to do with the deck. We get our first of the reconfigure equipments in Kamani Battle Arbor, a dog. Menace, creature gets +2/+2 in Menace. And whenever it or equipped creature deals come damage to a player, goad each creature that player controls. That's pretty important, especially in a deck like this where we're trying to attack. Anything we can do to goad our opponent's creatures and have them not attack us is just going to help our game plan. And this isn't a bad 2/2 Menace isn't a bad body if we needed to soup this up, but I think more often than not we want to get this on something else to get that +2/+2 in Menace. Lelia feels great. We're exiling things with Nahiri, so Lelia's just going to get bigger, and then she'll be able to play things off with her ability. So I love Lelia here. Again, fits the theme well, and she's just going to get bigger, and she's another great target to equip. Lizard Blades feels great in a deck like this. Comes down for 2, equips for 2. That creature gets double strike. Again, double strike is going to be a really painful ability for opponents to deal with, especially as these equipped creatures get bigger and bigger and bigger. Oxida Finisher, affinity for equipment and trample. Again, just a good body to strap an equipment to. It's a 7/5 that's probably going to come down for like 2 red for how much equipment we're going to have. As a 7/5 body with trample, you put an assist on this thing and good luck blocking it efficiently, right? Pure Steel Paladin, of course, one of the other most popular equipment creatures of all time. When our equipment enters the battlefield, control, draw a card, and equipment you control have equipped 0 as long as you have 3 more artifacts, which is not going to be hard in this deck. Metalcraft is not a hard thing to get in this deck because we have creatures that are artifacts, but we have so many artifacts that we're using. Rabid Battery, of course, has haste, gives +1/+1 in haste to something. Love Rabid Battery. It's probably a card that probably people aren't playing in a deck like this, but I think it fits so well. SRAM. Another one of our most popular cards here. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle, draw a card. We're going to be drawing a lot of cards with SRAM. SRAM, in a lot of ways, acts as a mini commander for the deck. Stone Hewer Giant, Vigilance, 1 and a white tap. Search your library for an equipment and put it into the battlefield. Attach it to a creature you control, then shuffle your library. Man, so this is kind of open the armory on a stick, right? Tap it and get it. The thing I think that's even better about Stone Hero Giant, if you think about it, is load this thing up with some equipment, attack with it. It has vigilance. Now you're hitting in for some good damage, and then tap it to get another one and attach it to something else. I like this. I didn't even know this card existed until I looked at his deck list. So I like it. I like the card a lot. I think it works really well. And then Wyleth, of course. Feels great here. Whenever it attacks, draw a card for each equipment attached to it. So you attach things to Wyleth, draw a bunch of cards, and then move things around. Like I said, I think this is a deck that I'm going to have a ton of fun trying to deal with because this is just literally value. I like a deck like this. It's not terribly expensive. Yes, there are some equipment that are going to be expensive in a deck like this. Shadow Spears getting up there and things like that. But again, just look at what this deck can do with just these, with just these equipment. You get a couple of these big ones on there, a couple of these trample enablers on here, and you're going to deal some massive damage. Again, that's probably why I'd like something like Embercleave, is because it's going to help give you more trample, and I feel like trample is going to be the thing that pushes you over the edge. Of course, we see it with Shadow Spear and 1 or 2 others, but I would probably bring Embercleave in. I'd probably bring Sculpting Steel in. I'd probably bring that Maul of the Skyclaves in. But those are only 3 I can think of off the top of my head of equipment that probably I would play that I don't see him playing, but that's my personal opinion in a deck list of 100 cards that, to be honest, feels really good. So let's give it a play test, as we're doing now on Milzy Brews. We see a decent starting hand. The problem is I have no white. So we either run the risk of not getting white, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to maul, because remember, we always get that free maul and we mull into a hand with one land and no, of course, G's. Okay, well, let's go one more time. And again, like I've said in the other videos this week, I've always had terrible luck goldfishing on Moxfield. I don't know what it is. And Andrew's actually playing more lands in this deck than I normally run in my own decks. I just very seldom have problems when it comes to the tabletop. But I seem to always have problems on here. So take a little bit of that with a grain of salt. Like, don't say, oh, well, I just mulled 3 times and I got one land every time. Like, I think if you want to judge Moxfield, take a deck and goldfish it 20, 30, 40 times on Moxfield and see really what you think versus actual paper. And that'll help you kind of get an idea. But here, we got 3 lands, only 1 land with color, but I think we'll end up being okay. So let's give this one a shot. Turn 1, we're going to Frost on the Mountain. Turn 2, I think we'll slap down the Sunhome. And I was kind of hoping for something that was 2, but we don't get it. On tap, there we go. We got the 3 for Command Tower, and we'll put down the Danitha. All right, so we got the Danitha down there on 3, and then for 4... I say we put the sword down and get the feast and famine down. All right, so and this is a good spot because, or I guess we could have put the brass squire down there as well. Probably should have done that instead because then the next turn we could tap it to attach. So I like it. All right, let's give it another go. 1 lander, eek. Let's give it them all. Here we go. Perfect. We got multiple lands. Turn 1, let's get the Axe Guard Armory down since it comes in tapped. I don't see anything for 1, right? The Dowsing Dagger is 2. So I would say let's do that. Get a color down and get that Dowsing Dagger down. Gives our opponents the plants, but we don't really care. Ooh, we see the Foundry on 3. Might as well get the Foundry and tap there since, again, we have nothing else to do. Turn 4, we're starting to brick lots of lands, but that's okay. Get that. And then we'll go to turn 5. I would probably play this and get that Nazan down. And then worst case scenario, yeah, turn 6, we probably just do Nahiri. So that was a little bit of a brick, not getting much on the low end of our spectrum, but that just goes to show you that magic things happen. Sometimes you give everything up. But again, I think those were one good playtest and one terrible one. That second one was probably a safe keep on my end. But again, that is why we test our decks. That's why we do those things. So we learn how our decks function. But let me know what you think down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this deck. Letting Andrew know what you think of his list. Again, I really like this list. I think he did a great job. And this is probably where I would recommend people start as far as an equipment deck goes. Having good pieces, pretty cost-effective pieces as far as money-wise for anyone trying to build the deck. It would probably be pretty darn strong because you have 6 or 7 really secondary commanders. And if you can't get Nahiri out, a lot of these cards are going to do what you want to do. But I will catch you guys next time.